My name is Riley Morgan. I'm 32, and I thought I had a perfect life. My boyfriend, William Davis, 31, seemed loving, charming, utterly devoted, or at least that's what I believed. We had been together for 3 years, living in his downtown apartment for the past 2. I paid my share of rent, utilities, groceries, and even helped with some of his work-related expenses. To my friends, I might have looked like the supportive girlfriend, maybe even the whipped one. But to me, it felt natural. Being there for someone you love, building a life together, investing in their dreams. William was a tech consultant, methodical, intelligent, charming in that effortless way that makes people trust you immediately. But there was another side of him, the one he rarely showed me directly, the side that spoke freely to his friends about the people he claimed to love. That side revealed itself one Friday evening. I was in our small second bedroom, the one I used as my home office. My laptop glowed softly in the dim light as I reviewed a proposal for a client. In the living room, William had his friends over, Veronica, his ex-girlfriend, and another woman, Melissa. They were laughing, glasses clinking, a few bottles of wine on the coffee table. Their voices carried through the thin walls. "I swear," Veronica said, her tone amused, almost conspiratorial. "He's completely obsessed with you. You could do literally anything and he'd stay." I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My pulse quickened, not with anger, at least not yet, but with a sinking, icy disbelief. William laughed lightly, that infuriating, easy laugh I had once found charming. "Bored? Never. It's like having a personal assistant who happens to be sweet and focused. Honestly, he's hopelessly committed. Obsessed. I'd say whipped," Veronica chimed in, smirking. The words echoed in my ears. Obsessed. Whipped. Committed to a fault. My brain raced. Was this how he really saw me? Not as a partner, not as someone he loved, but as a convenient, devoted employee to his life? I tried to breathe, to stay calm. I didn't respond. I simply sat there, listening, cataloging every word, every inflection, every laugh. The numbers, the calculations, the effort I'd put into supporting our life together, the rent, groceries, weekend getaways, countless sacrifices flashed before me. And now it was reduced to this, a game in which I was the loyal, blind participant. I thought back to the project I had poured months of sweat, money, and heart into. William had been in charge of its creative direction, but I had done most of the labor myself, researching, sourcing, coordinating. And now, in the living room, he and his friends were essentially mocking my devotion, discussing how easily they could test my loyalty. The conversation continued. Veronica's voice dropped slightly, conspiratorial. "And that guy from your art class? Nathan? Be careful. You know he's interested." William scoffed. "Nathan? He's fun. Just a little distraction. But you know it's you. You're the one who's actually going to finish the project. He's completely obsessed. Won't leave." The words were like acid in my mind. Obsessed. Won't leave. You're mine no matter what. My mind switched gears. I was no longer hurt. I was auditing. I ran the numbers, literally and figuratively. Every dollar I'd spent, every late night supporting his work, every ounce of patience and trust. The conclusion was painfully clear. The asset was toxic. I didn't say a word. I sat there for another hour, letting them move on to lighter topics, the latest gossip, fashion choices, weekend plans. I finished my client report. I closed my laptop, and then I began to plan. It was going to be silent, meticulous, irreversible. I packed a duffel bag, my laptop, hard drives, essential clothing, passport, toiletries. I canceled shared subscriptions quietly, logged out of accounts, removed myself from his financial entanglements. I called the storage facility where I had safely kept my project materials, ensuring everything would be secure. By 3 a.m., I had left the apartment, leaving nothing behind that could be taken or used against me. Driving through the empty streets, the city lights reflected in the windshield like distant stars, cold, indifferent, yet strangely comforting. I pulled into a 24-hour diner, ordered black coffee, and sat down, letting the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and late-night patrons wash over me. My phone stayed off for the first 48 hours, a buffer between me and the storm I knew was coming. From the shadows of betrayal, I had begun to emerge with clarity. William arrogance, entitlement, and blatant disrespect had been exposed, not to him, but to myself. And now, armed with foresight, meticulous planning, and undeniable evidence of my own value, I was no longer just a participant in his life. I was the one in control. The night stretched on. Outside, the city slept. Inside, I sipped my coffee, staring at the steam curling like smoke from a distant fire. This was the awakening, the moment when betrayal became clarity, when devotion transformed into strategy. And from this quiet, lonely diner booth, I made a vow. I would not be anyone's employee, pawn, or disposable partner ever again. By the time the sun rose, I had already secured a temporary place to stay, a quiet, anonymous corporate hotel across town. I paid for 2 weeks in advance. Clean sheets, fast internet, no lingering traces of William or his apartment. For the first 48 hours, my phone remained off. The world beyond those hotel walls did not exist. I let myself breathe, fully aware that a storm would inevitably follow. When I finally powered the phone back on, it was chaos. Messages, voicemails, missed calls, hundreds of them. William was frantic. The texts began with panic. "Riley, are you okay? Please, just tell me you're alive." Then came anger. "What the hell is wrong with you? You can't just disappear. You have things to do." Mixed in, a bizarrely passive-aggressive note from Veronica, attempting to play mediator. "Hey, Riley, Karen is freaking out. Just call her." I did not respond. Not yet. I had spent the last 2 months quietly gathering evidence, receipts, statements, documentation of every dollar and every effort I had put into supporting our life together, and now the time for silence had purpose. I spent the next few days systematically disentangling myself from William's world, logging out of shared streaming services, canceling joint subscriptions, canceling shared meal kits and automatic payments, transferring my personal projects and assets, my carefully restored Silver Lining project, to a secure storage location, creating meticulous spreadsheets listing every financial contribution I had made to his apartment, meals, and lifestyle. Each action was deliberate. Each step was calculated. Unlike the frantic panic in William's messages, I moved calmly, methodically, with no hint of hesitation. The emotional satisfaction of silent, effective control was intoxicating. Late one evening, I sat by the window of the hotel room, phone buzzing relentlessly on the table. I didn't check it. Instead, I reflected on the months I had invested in a relationship that, in truth, had been built more on convenience and my devotion than any genuine partnership. The betrayal was stark, but clarity had replaced the hurt. I was no longer vulnerable. The first contact I allowed myself to review came from William himself. "Riley, please, I'm scared. I just want to talk. Are you hurt? Did something happen?" I allowed a small, ironic smile. I wasn't hurt in the way he imagined. I was calculating. I had been hurt, yes, but that hurt had transformed into power. By the third day, I began a meticulous audit of the Silver Lining project. William had considered it a joint endeavor, though I had done almost all the physical and financial labor. I reviewed every receipt, every invoice, every hour logged. My spreadsheet reflected a total investment of $45,000, plus countless weekends, nights, and early mornings. I thought back to the laughter and voices I had overheard, the casual cruelty of William and Veronica, the condescending jokes about my loyalty and devotion. The scene played like a replayed film in my mind, but this time I was in the director's chair. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer a passive character. I was the protagonist controlling the story. Messages continued to pour in. Panic, anger, confusion, righteous indignation, all in a chaotic symphony. "Riley, you can't just leave. We have plans, projects. You're making a mistake. Why are you shutting me out? This is insane." Each one was a testament to the truth I had uncovered. William believed he had a right to control me, to manipulate my devotion into obedience. And yet here I was, calm, detached, planning my next moves. The hotel room became my command center. Every financial transaction, every document, every text from William was cataloged and cross-referenced. I even set up a secure folder for photographs, notes, and backups, evidence of every contribution, every act of care, every effort he had never truly appreciated. By the end of the week, I was ready. I would reclaim my property, the silver lining, quietly, without confrontation, but with absolute authority. I had lawyers on standby, just in case, and movers scheduled for an early morning retrieval. Every precaution had been taken, every outcome anticipated. Emotionally, I felt a mixture of relief and quiet rage. Relief that I had finally removed myself from a toxic, manipulative environment. Rage that someone I loved and trusted could speak of me with such casual contempt, as if my devotion were merely a form of entertainment for his ego and his friends' amusement. And yet, beneath it all, there was clarity, a sharp, cold focus that made the coming confrontation almost irrelevant. I didn't need him to understand. I didn't need his approval. I only needed truth, proof, and the courage to execute my plan. By the seventh night, I was ready to act. The messages had stopped being just noise. They had become the soundtrack to a drama that was about to reach its climax. I poured a final cup of coffee, staring out the window at the city lights. The storm was coming for William, and this time I would be standing at the center, not as a victim, but as the orchestrator. The silent exit was complete. Every step had been deliberate, every action calculated, every decision infused with the knowledge that I was reclaiming not just my property, but my life. The next chapter, the confrontation, would test his entitlement, his arrogance, and his belief that he could ever control me. But for now, I allowed myself a rare moment of satisfaction. The quiet, exhilarating thrill of freedom, finally earned through patience, strategy, and unwavering resolve. It was Tuesday afternoon when William finally tracked me down. I had anticipated it, of course. The storm I had been preparing for had been building since the moment I left. I was sitting in the hotel lobby, a black coffee in hand, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the polished floor, when the automatic doors slid open. There she was, William, flanked by Veronica, like some self-appointed counsel, his eyes wide, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. His hair was slightly disheveled, his posture tense, as if the world had suddenly betrayed him. "Riley," he said, breathless, as he approached. What are you doing here?" I didn't rise. I didn't smile. I only looked at him, calm, deliberate, unmoved. "You found me," I said evenly. "Good. You'll need to understand why I left." He stepped closer, a nervous, almost pleading energy in his movements. "You can't just disappear. You can't just take everything, this life." I tilted my head, letting my gaze sweep across him, cataloging every detail. "Everything?" I asked softly. "Everything I worked for, you mean. Everything I invested in with my own money, my own time, my own labor." His jaw tightened. Veronica, playing her usual role of moral support, tried to interject. "Riley, seriously? You're really going to throw away 2 years because of some—" "Don't," I said, sharper than intended. The first crack of steel in my voice cut through their chatter. "Don't try to explain this away. Don't try to make it about your hurt feelings or entitlement. I am not here to argue. I am here to set the record straight." I pulled a neat folder from my bag, carefully prepared, laminated with spreadsheets, invoices, receipts, and photographs documenting every single contribution I had made. Money, labor, emotional investment, the hours spent ensuring his project succeeded. William's eyes flicked down at it, a mixture of shock and disbelief crossing his face. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the truth. This is what I built. Alone, mostly. Your contribution? Minimal, at best. The rest of it, your ego, your entitlement, your obsession with the idea that I am obsessed with you, that's yours. You're out of luck." His lips parted, as if he wanted to argue, but I spoke before he could. "I left quietly. I secured my property. I removed myself from the chaos you created. I did not yell. I did not fight. I did what needed to be done." Veronica's face shifted. She was no longer amused. She glanced at William, then back at me, trying to gauge the changing dynamic. "Riley, you can't just—" "Yes, I can," I said, my voice low, steady, and final. And I did. The tension in the lobby was palpable. Patrons began to notice the intensity of the exchange. I didn't care. For months, I had rehearsed this confrontation in my mind. Every question, every objection, every argument had been anticipated. I had lawyers ready, movers scheduled, documentation airtight. William's shoulders slumped slightly, a sign of desperation. You can't take the project. My followers, my sponsorship, it's worth real money. You can't just. I let out a soft laugh, the kind that carries both disbelief and quiet satisfaction. Your sponsorship, the Instagram account you bragged about? I shook my head. It's irrelevant. The project is mine. All receipts, all labor hours, all investment is documented. You have no legal claim. His face darkened. Veronica whispered something to him, but I wasn't listening. My focus was on the calm inevitability of justice, the ledger of effort, the proof of betrayal. It was all laid out. You are selfish, he said finally, voice rising, a mix of panic and anger. You're destroying everything. You can't just. I already did, I said, my voice icy. I removed myself from your chaos. I liquidated the asset. I reclaimed what I built. And I will do nothing more to participate in this toxic cycle. You can send lawyers. You can threaten. You will get nothing. William's face drained of color. He glanced at Veronica, then back at me, disbelief morphing into rage. You're serious? I nodded, calm as a still lake at dawn. Absolutely. And if you persist, my lawyer will handle the rest. Every purchase, every hour, every dollar, you'll see it in writing. You have no leverage here. The shift in the air was palpable. Patrons and staff were now aware, but the power dynamic had crystallized. William was no longer the one in control. I was, calm, prepared, and unyielding. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and looked him in the eyes. This is over. The manipulation, the entitlement, the casual cruelty, it ends now. You will not define my worth. You will not control my life. You will not erase the time, effort, and love I invested. For the first time, I saw true fear in his eyes, not of me, but of the reality he had created for himself. The meticulously built life he thought was untouchable was, in fact, dismantled piece by piece, not by accident, not by betrayal, but by me, the one he underestimated the most. And in that moment, as the automatic doors slid shut behind him and Veronica, I realized something profound. I had not just reclaimed a project or property, I had reclaimed myself. The fallout was swift, inevitable, and strangely satisfying. William retreated, lawyer in tow, attempting the usual mix of threats, guilt, and legal intimidation. But I was ready. Every receipt, spreadsheet, and record had been meticulously organized. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Alana, reviewed the documentation and smiled. This is airtight, she said. They'll have nothing. William tried multiple angles. A demand letter claiming joint ownership of the project. Allegations of lost sponsorship revenue. Emotional manipulation. Attempts to involve law enforcement. Claims of financial abuse and threats. All of it collapsed under the weight of evidence I had collected. The Silver Lining Project had been purchased, restored, and financed by me. Every receipt, every payment, every hour logged, documented. I had legally removed myself from all shared accounts, subscriptions, and financial entanglements. William had no legal claim to my property, my work, or my labor. When law enforcement became involved, once William claimed abuse, I presented the folder I always carried, the title, invoices, bank statements, and clear evidence of my non-involvement in his finances. The officers, after reviewing everything, confirmed this was a civil matter, not a criminal one. William manipulations and theatrics had no legal weight. Meanwhile, the Silver Lining Project, once tainted by betrayal, was finally restored to its purpose, a labor of love completed on my terms. I sold it to a collector specializing in vintage restorations. My $45,000 investment, plus the 18 months of labor, yielded a $10,000 profit, not counting the priceless satisfaction of reclaiming something that had been a symbol of manipulation. William's Instagram following and his attempted sponsorships withered. Without my labor and the carefully curated project content, the account became meaningless. His friends, Veronica included, quietly distanced themselves. Mutual acquaintances, once blind to his entitlement, now saw the full story. The woman who had been his obsessed employee, Anine, was in fact the architect of her own liberation. Emotionally, the process was complex. There were moments of exhaustion, of reliving betrayal, of questioning my own decisions. I allowed myself to feel the hurt, to acknowledge the rage, to honor the countless hours lost to someone else's manipulation. But through it all, a sense of clarity persisted. I had reclaimed my life, my autonomy, and my dignity. The quietest victories were the sweetest. Emails from friends who had been caught in the crossfire, now apologizing for underestimating William's behavior. Letters of acknowledgement from professionals and contractors who had worked on the project. Even Veronica reached out privately, admitting she hadn't realized how serious the situation was. I moved into a new condo, just for me. No reminders of the past life, no entanglements. I invested in a new espresso machine, indulged in the quiet luxury of personal choice, and allowed myself the freedom to enjoy spaces that reflected only my life and my tastes. Months later, the financial and emotional dust settled. William had no leverage, no recourse, no followers, and no influence over the life I was rebuilding. The Silver Lining Project became a symbol, not of betrayal, but of liberation, strategy, and resilience. And me? I allowed myself one final acknowledgement of the truth I had learned. I was obsessed with my own autonomy, my own integrity, and my refusal to ever be anyone's pawn again. I didn't need approval, attention, or validation from those who had underestimated me. I had my life, my dignity, and my freedom, priceless treasures I would never surrender. The city lights glimmered outside my window, a quiet affirmation of everything I had reclaimed. And for the first time in months, I smiled, not out of relief, not out of vindication, but out of the calm certainty that I was finally, unequivocally, in control of my own story. The months after the confrontation passed quietly, almost serenely, without the constant pressure of William's demands, the whispered manipulations, and the emotional exhaustion. Life regained a rhythm I hadn't known I'd been missing. I spent mornings in my new condo, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Simple pleasures, the pages of a book, the hum of my espresso machine, the laughter of friends I could trust, reminded me that life was not meant to be a performance for someone else's amusement. Occasionally, I would think of William, not with anger or regret, but as one might reflect on a chapter that had shaped them. The lessons were painful, but invaluable. Loyalty without reciprocity is a trap. Devotion without respect is dangerous. And above all, self-worth must never be negotiable. I allowed myself to dream again. Small plans first. A weekend getaway, a new hobby, reconnecting with old friends. Then larger ambitions. Travel to cities I had longed to explore, taking on personal projects untainted by someone else's entitlement. The Silver Lining Project, once a symbol of betrayal, had become a reminder of resilience and resourcefulness. I had transformed it into a success, and in doing so, I had transformed myself. Emails and messages from former acquaintances slowly resumed, now tinged with respect rather than curiosity or judgment. Even Veronica reached out one last time, expressing regret for her part in the chaos. I replied politely, with gratitude for her honesty, but kept the boundaries firm. The people I chose to surround myself with now reflected the values I held: honesty, integrity, and mutual respect. I realized that freedom was not simply the absence of conflict. It was the ability to act according to my own principles, to pursue what mattered to me, and to let go of what did not. I had been obsessed once, but not with someone else's life, their approval, or their perceptions. Now, my obsession was with living authentically, unapologetically, and fully in control of my own story. One evening, as I watched the city lights flicker across the skyline, I felt a profound sense of peace. The past, with all its betrayals and missteps, was no longer a chain around my ankles, but a series of stepping stones. I had walked through anger, deception, and manipulation, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. Life was no longer about proving my worth to anyone else. It was about honoring it for myself. And for the first time in years, I felt a quiet excitement for the future, unpredictable, unscripted, and entirely mine. In that quiet moment, I smiled, not from victory over another, not from revenge or triumph, but from the simple, unshakable certainty that I had reclaimed what mattered most: my life, my dignity, and my freedom. And with that, I finally felt whole.